Snow White. There was once a beautiful princess. Her hair was black, her eyes were blue, and her skin was so fair that she was called Snow White. Her stepmother, the queen, was jealous. One day she looked into her magic mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" When the mirror replied, "Snow White," the queen was very angry. So the queen sent for a hunter. "Take Snow White into the forest and kill her," she told him. But the hunter loved Snow White and did not want to kill her. He took her into the forest, and there he had to leave her. "Run far away," he told her, "and never come back to your cruel stepmother." Poor Snow White. She was all alone, and she began to cry. She wandered through the forest and came at last to a little red house. Everything in it was small. A small table, a small cupboard, 7 small chairs, and 7 small beds. Snow White lay down on one of the beds and went to sleep. While she slept, 7 green-capped dwarfs came home. "Who is this in our little house?" they asked. The 7 dwarfs liked Snow White. "Will you live in our house and take care of us?" they asked. Snow White said, "Yes, I will stay, and I will tidy your house, and bake bread and cakes and pies for you." In the palace, the jealous queen asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest now of all?" And the mirror still said, "Snow White." The queen was so angry, she broke the mirror. She knew now that Snow White was still alive, so she dressed up as an old woman and went into the forest. Soon she found the dwarf's house and gave Snow White an apple. But the apple was poisoned. When Snow White bit into it, she fell down as if she were dead. How the dwarfs cried when they found her. They wanted to keep her forever, and the tears ran down their faces. Then one of the dwarfs opened his eyes. He had an idea. "Let us make her a coffin of glass," he said, "and put flowers around it." Snow White lay in the glass coffin for many days and many years, and still she was as beautiful as ever. One day, a handsome prince rode up to the dwarf's house. When he saw Snow White, he fell in love with her at once. "I cannot live without her," he said. As the dwarfs lifted the coffin, they jolted it. The piece of poisoned apple flew out of Snow White's throat, and she woke up. She saw the prince and loved him, and all the dwarfs went to their wedding. Cinderella. There was once a girl called Cinderella. She was very pretty, but her clothes were old and patched. She lived with her cruel stepmother, who made her scrub floors and work hard all day. Cinderella had 2 stepsisters. They were jealous of Cinderella because she was so pretty, and they were not pretty at all. Every day, poor Cinderella swept and dusted the house. She never had any fun. Sometimes she cried a little because she was unhappy. One morning, a letter came from the prince, the king's son, asking everyone to a ball. The 2 ugly sisters put on fine new dresses. "Of course you cannot come, Cinderella," they said. "You have no new dress." Cinderella had one friend. He was a little white dove. When her stepsisters had gone, Cinderella told him of her troubles. "I'll fetch your fairy godmother," cooed the white dove. "She will help you." The fairy godmother came. She turned Cinderella's old clothes into a lovely yellow dress, a pumpkin into a coach, and in it Cinderella went to the ball. "But you must come back home at midnight, for then your dress will turn back to rags and patches." When Cinderella got to the palace, the prince came to welcome her. She was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. "May I dance with you?" the prince asked Cinderella. The band began to play, and the prince danced every dance with Cinderella. He had fallen in love with her, but suddenly Cinderella heard the clock strike. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 went the clock. Cinderella ran from the palace. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 went the clock. She dropped her shoe as she ran. 11, 12 went the clock. As she reached home, she was in her old dress again. The prince was very sad. Who was that beautiful girl? Where has she gone? He asked. But no one knew. Then he saw her little shoe. "I must find the owner of this," he said, "and marry her, for I love her very much." Next morning, the prince rode from house to house. Every girl in the land tried on the shoe. "Let us try it on," said the two ugly sisters, but their feet were much too big. Then a herald found Cinderella in the kitchen. "You must try on the shoe too," he told her. She tried on the little shoe, and it fitted perfectly. The prince was overjoyed to find Cinderella again. He took her to the palace and gave her a sparkling wedding dress. Cinderella and the prince were married the next day and lived happily ever after. Red Riding Hood. There was once a little girl called Red Riding Hood, because she always wore a red hood. Her grandmother had made it. One day her mother said, "Listen, Red Riding Hood, Granny is ill, and you must take this basket of food to her cottage in the woods." Red Riding Hood took the basket and set off. Suddenly, she heard a rustling in the trees just behind her. "What can it be?" she thought. It was a wicked wolf, but he pretended to be friendly. "Where are you going, Red Riding Hood?" he asked. "I am going to visit my granny," she said. "Well, well," said the wolf, "what a good little girl." Red Riding Hood hurried off. But then she stopped on her way to pick flowers for her granny. The wolf hurried off too. He ran as fast as he could to grandmother's house. "Now I shall eat her all up," he thought to himself. When the wolf came to the house, he knocked at the door. Grandmother was lying sick in bed. "Come in, dear Red Riding Hood, the door is open," she called. The wicked wolf rushed in. He swallowed up grandmother in one bite and hopped into bed. Just as Red Riding Hood arrived, she knocked at the door. "Come in," called the wolf softly. He was pretending to be grandmother. He wore her nightcap and drew the covers up to his chin. "What big ears you have, Granny," said Red Riding Hood, coming near. "What a big mouth! And what big eyes! And teeth! All the better to eat you with," cried the wolf, jumping up. Red Riding Hood rushed out of the door into the arms of a hunter who was passing by. He drew his knife and killed the wicked wolf. When the wolf was cut open, Grandmother stepped out, unhurt. Thank you, kind hunter," she said. And they all sat down and feasted on the good things in Red Riding Hood's basket. Hup-O-my-Thumb. A woodcutter and his wife had 7 children. When the youngest was born, he was no bigger than a man's thumb, so he was called Hup-O-my-Thumb. The woodcutter was very poor. One night he said to his wife, "We have no more money to buy food. Tomorrow I must take the children to the wood and leave them there. Perhaps someone will help them." Now Hup-O-my-Thumb heard all his father said. He crept out of the house and filled his pockets with round white pebbles. The next day he dropped his pebbles, one by one, along the way to the wood. The children were left all alone in the wood, but Hup-O-my-Thumb said, "Don't cry, we can follow the line of pebbles I dropped and find our way home." This they did, and their parents were very happy to see them, but they still had no money. The poor woodcutter said to his wife, "Tomorrow I must take the children back to the wood, and I shall lock the door tonight so that Hup-O-my-Thumb cannot go out and get any pebbles." Clever Hup-O-my-Thumb heard this too, and he saved his last piece of bread. The next day he dropped crumbs along the way to the wood, but the birds ate the crumbs. And when the children were left alone, they were lost. They wandered sadly until they came to a big house. They knocked on the door. A woman opened it and said, "Don't you know this is an ogre's house? He eats small children." But she had a kind heart and hid them in a cupboard. When the ogre came in, he gave a loud roar. "I smell children," he cried. "No," said his wife, "it's just your dinner you can smell." The children in the cupboard were very, very frightened that the ogre would find them, but he ate an enormous dinner and then fell asleep. While he slept and snored, the children crept out of the cupboard. "The ogre is wearing 7-league boots," said Hup-O-my-Thumb. Very gently he pulled them off. "With these 7-league boots, we can find our way home," he said. Hup-O-my-Thumb put on the boots. He led the children home in a twinkling of an eye. Their parents were overjoyed and hugged everyone. When Hop-O-my-Thumb wore the magic boots, he could work as fast as 3 men. He helped his father every day so they were never poor again.